If there is some 14-year-old Black girl watching me right now, I hope she's a million times better than me. If I did anything that inspired her, that it's just a way of fanning her flame and encouraging her to continue on. So yeah, that really means a lot to me.
From To Be Magnetic, this is the Expanded Podcast with your host, Lacy Phillips. As the leading destination for neural manifestation, we dispel the woo-woo in order to help you create real, tangible results based on neuroplasticity, psychology, epigenetics, and energetics. Our goal is to normalize the practice of manifestation and empower you to get into the driver's seat of your life in order to manifest the experiences, relationships, and things that most align with your authenticity. Part of our manifestation process entails expanding past your limiting subconscious beliefs. Therefore, by tuning into this podcast with interviews from experts, thought leaders, spiritual teachers, scientists, and those with neural manifestation success stories, you're starting the process of expanding your subconscious in order to see to believe that anything you desire is possible. And by pressing play, the process begins. Today's guest may be no stranger to you with her massive following on Instagram. But I'm so excited to introduce you, if you haven't heard of her, Morgan Harper Nichols. She's an artist, poet, musician, and mother. You're likely familiar with the way that she uses her art to integrate it into Instagram, where she takes art and poetry inspired by stories, conversation, and everyday life. So in this episode, Morgan and I dive into her journey of following pings, being authentic, the energetic of surrender, and finding success through a slow burn, especially how both of us chased after something for a very long time artistically without a ton of prosperity and reward from it, and how we really listen to our rock bottoms to pivot. She also gives me awesome tips on motherhood. We connect on both being Aquarians and so much more. So whether you're an artist or you're anybody right now in your life looking to pivot from one career or one passion to another, this episode is going to be extremely expansive for you. And now a word from our partners. So here at TBM, when we began the process of starting to vet who we would partner with on this podcast, a couple of filtrations became very clear to us. It had to be something that we use and highly believe in due to science-backed, quality, sustainability, accessibility, something that we know everybody in our community will highly benefit from, and it has to be chic. This partnership is no exception. If you haven't heard of the company Beekeepers Naturals, it's about to be on your radar very prominently. I had a chance to talk to the founder, which you'll be hearing from on this podcast. Her story totally blew me away. Because of having an autoimmune issue that would often spiral into really bad bouts of tonsillitis, it started her journey on natural products, just like a lot of us go down. I could really resonate because I've gone on such a journey with hormone issues, endocrine issues, and namely really bad adrenal issues. So as everybody, like myself, when I was practicing manifestation, you start to discover a process that really works better for yourself, or you invent one. She did the exact same thing. Because what she was looking for wasn't readily accessible, she took matters into her own hands, became a beekeeper herself, used incredibly sustainable practices, and then began developing her own products. Jump forward to Beekeeper Natural today. Their whole intention at this company is to reinvent the medicine cabinet, which every one of her products completely does. They're the very first propolis brand that's totally backed by science and have a proper medical advisory board. That means they have MDs on it, naturopaths, and so forth, who can weigh in at all times to make sure that this is scientifically sound. They also practice the most state-of-the-art sustainable practices to ensure that the bees are totally safe. We're going to be highlighting a couple of the products that we think are absolutely extraordinary. And the very first one that I want to highlight for myself that I've been taking during pregnancy is their bee pollen. So I've been a huge, huge fan of bee pollen for years, and I've definitely always thrown it on top of smoothies or smoothie bowls or acai bowls, or sometimes I've just taken it out of the teaspoon. What I think is really powerful about Beekeeper Naturals bee pollen, as opposed to most that you'll find in the markets, in the health food stores, is theirs is 100% raw pollen. So that means once you open it, you'll want to stick it in the fridge to maintain the enzymes. But most importantly, it means that 1 teaspoon gets you way more benefits than you would if you were using a non-raw bee pollen product. And the most beautiful thing about it, like myself, when I was incredibly nauseous and sick in the beginning of pregnancy and could not down any type of prenatal vitamin, 1 teaspoon of their pollen is a complete broad spectrum of vitamins. It's basically like the minerals and vitamins you need in a day, especially the B vitamins. You can find that linked below. And then the other product that I really want to put on your radar is the bee-powered superfood honey. So if you're a fan of, say, like Manuka honey or any other type of honey, this is like it times 1,000. So inside of it, not only does it have the incredible raw enzymatic honey, it also has royal jelly, raw bee pollen, like I was just talking about, and bee propolis extract. So in this one particular honey, you get exposure from every single superfood that the hive produces. So not only will you take this internally and it will have all of the medicinal benefits you know about honey, we all know about honey, but royal jelly, the science that's getting really strong in studies that's coming out is how impactful it is for your brain. The raw bee pollen, so you're getting your full spectrum of vitamins in a day with literally 1 teaspoon, and the propolis, which is one of the most effective immune boosters and preventatives when it comes to things like viruses and colds, all in one honey jar. The other thing to note about this, why I love it so much, is it's fantastic topically. So if you were to use this as a face mask weekly, you see a lot of people are always doing Manuka honey on their face. Well, this is that times 1,000. Not only taking it internally are you going to live your best life, for lack of any better word, but also you can use it externally weekly or even twice a week as a beauty regimen. So if you would like to check out Beekeepers Natural, use the code all caps TBM at checkout for 15% off any of their products site-wide. Again, that's TBM all caps for 15% off for Beekeepers Naturals. Or you can find in the link below to click on that to the specific products I talked about today and Beekeeper Naturals site. And we'll be educating more soon. Blue Blocks. You've heard me talk about them for the last 2 years because I'm such a huge fan of everything they do. Like you, I was a podcast listener listening to another podcast, and I heard about them for the first time. And therefore, I bought my very first product. I still use it today. It's the red glasses. And I've gone on now to buy multiple of their products with my own money. The very favorite that I use every single evening, I also take it with me every place I travel so that I can use it on the airplane and I can use it for jet lag, as well as using it for DIs during the day and the evenings, is the sleep mask. Now, before this, I used many sleep masks because I was doing the DIs with them. However, once they released this product, I've never looked back. And I own 3 of them, again, that I've bought with my own money. I have one at the Forest House. I have one that's always packed and ready for travel. And I have one in Topanga. What's so miraculous about these is that they've developed them so that they're kind of like goggles, meaning that when they're over your eyes, they're not smashing your eyes. So they're not creating wrinkles. They're also not creating your eyelashes to smash and get into your eyes, things that I've experienced with other eye masks. So it's kind of like a goggle in the sense that you can actually open your eyes when you're wearing them and you can move your eyes around. But here's the kicker, and it's totally backed by science. They 100% block out light. So if you've been looking for an eye mask to do DIs with, to travel with, or like me, if you still are in the country and receive light pollution at night, which I do in Topanga coming in through the valley, you will want to pick these up. They're also really helpful when I'm with Max. We actually have a no light policy at night. I'm kind of 17th century where once the sun goes down, I kick on all of the candles. But if we are trying to connect and cuddle and be in bed, or we're watching a show together, I will often stick this on and I can't see anything that he's up to after I've gone to bed. Because again, I don't like having the computer or any type of blue light around me, because I'm so sensitive hormonally. If anybody's ever struggled with any type of fertility or hormonal disruption like I have, you will want to listen to the 2 episodes linked below that I have with the founder, Andy Mant, of Blue Blocks, where he goes deep into the science of how blue light disrupts our circadian rhythm, our hormones, our sleep, and our happiness. So you can directly use the link Blue Blocks, that's BLUBLOX.com/pages/magnetic, where you'll automatically receive the 15% discount, or use the code at checkout, all caps, magnetic, MAGNETIC, to receive 15% off your purchase. Let's get into it. We were just laughing about how Morgan was sharing that there might be a train coming through soon and how we have to pause if that's the case. And I was like, we'll work through all of the COVID stuff. But the funny thing is, my life was already so COVID prepared, which I think I'm very privileged in that sense. Before it took off, I was already working from home. The whole team was. We were remote. We're all digital. So it's interesting how now I think we're a year in, so I don't think now, but how it was so new to have to adjust to these different processes for people. How's that been for you?
Yeah. So it's interesting. I was similar to you for a while. And then in February, literally a year ago, almost to the day, wow, exactly the day. Okay, that's crazy. I just realized that we signed a lease for my first studio space that was going to have workshop space, offices upstairs. It was just like a dream come true. I was like, how is this happening?
And this was still in LA?
Yeah, in Orange County. Yeah, we're in Orange County. Yeah. And I was just so excited about it. And then by the time we got it all set up, I was doing like a live like web show type thing. I was dreaming big. I'm naturally an introvert, but I was like, 2020, this is the year. I'm doing all the things. Like I'm doing it. My book had come out. I was just like going for it. So yeah, literally right after the first 3, that was when the first shutdown started. So in a way, I have definitely had some mixed feelings because my natural MO is to work from home and to kind of have my own space. And yeah, even though I do miss that space, I did have to kind of look at my life and say, for what's going on and even some of the projects I've been working on, I'm like, this does make sense to be able to be at home. And I have a toddler and we run my online shop from home now. So it's like, I do feel that in some ways, because I had that whole season of like being a freelancer working at home before, I was prepared. So yeah, that was a really long way of answering your question.
No, I love it because I think so many people listening can relate, in different capacities and obviously different scales. But like even the first thought in my mind, I had done a remodel. We have, this retreat house up north, and I'm doing a personal remodel with my fiance in Topanga. And so you went through the space, like totally hashed out construction. I'm thinking of how traumatic both of these experiences have been for me. And so you landed in the space, all is done, and then the rug's pulled out from under you. I would literally have had a nervous breakdown. You're really chill about this.
I sound chill now.
Okay.
I definitely, and I say this a lot about my work that that other people see that I share online. I'm, sharing poetry and art. I'm like, a lot of that stuff comes out of my own working through grief and frustration. And then it turns into pretty colors. Cause I'm like, yeah, I definitely went through it. That was really hard because, and I'm not exaggerating, I can honestly say the year 2020, I had spent the whole 10 years leading up to that trying to figure out, what am I supposed to be doing? I know I'm a creative. I know I love to make things. I know I love to write, and I could not figure it out. And that was like the first time that I literally felt like I verbalized and said out loud, this is what I want to be doing. Like, it was really weird because I was like, I thought I was being brave. I thought I was, really taking the leap. And yeah, it was really actually right before this. I just remember I was talking to my husband and I literally said, I was like, oh, I never got any good pictures of the studio before we had to leave. I just realized that. And I was just like, yeah, that's kind of a bummer. So yeah, it does still affect me in a lot of ways. And at the same time, I feel like it's just such a reminder to me of to just like remember what truly matters. And I really am still so grateful that I even have a job right now and that I'm able to draw pictures on an iPad and that's considered a job. To me, that's still just like when I zoom out, it's okay. I am still incredibly grateful for that. And that the core and the heart of what I do has not changed. And that's what I'm holding on to.
Well, already the way my brain and gifts work is I start spinning out to like figure them out. So the very first question I have to ask, and if you know all three, that's amazing. But what is your sun sign? And if you know sun, moon, and rising, even better for astrology.
Oh, I don't know very much, but I do know that me and Oprah are the same.
You're Aquarius.
Yeah. My birthday is in 3 days.
Wow.
You know how like people are like, oh, you look up your like a side and then like you see celebrities. All I was saying is like I just remember seeing Oprah and I was like, okay, I'll just go with that.
I mean, who doesn't want to share Oprah's birthday?
But yeah, February 4th is my birthday.
Wow. So happy birthday. I'm an Aquarius as well.
Thank you. Oh, awesome.
Did you catch on Instagram? I don't even know what to call it. I wouldn't call it like a bundle of flowers, but did you see the flowers that Oprah sent Alicia Keys for her birthday?
Oh, I actually did not. I'll have to look that up.
It was so incredible and beautiful. But okay, that makes a lot of sense because in my mind, I was like, she's so optimistic. I could feel that you were somewhere in that realm of maybe Saggy, Aquarian. So that's really cool to know.
I'm glad we have something in common.
We certainly do. And I know. And, we have a lot. And one big thing that we'll dig into soon, which I'm going to take a moment because I want to hear a little bit more about your upbringing. But I can really relate. You're like the ping queen from anything we've researched, where it's like you went from, and I'll get into this deeper, but you went from like your music career and listening to a ping and against all odds just said no and tried something else. And so I have a very similar story. And so I can't wait to dig into that. But before we do, give us your cultural background and upbringing and what that was like to inform what you are today.
Oh, yes. I love that question. I was born in Long Beach, California, but I grew up in just outside of Atlanta, Georgia. I was a homeschooled preacher's kid and I only have one sibling. So we were really weird because we were homeschooled, but at least in our community, homeschool families are typically large families. And we were not. It was just the two of us. So like a lot of people look at my sister and I today and are like, you all are so close. It was like, well, we had to be. That was the only other kid I saw. So yeah, we were very close. And honestly, a lot of my early years, unfortunately, was marked by a lot of health issues just in my family. My sister has a neurological disorder and there was some bullying there. There was some just feeling isolated and like weird kids. And yeah, I feel like one of the, I don't know why. You know how people say silver lining? For some reason, I like to say gold lining. I don't know if that makes sense, but I just like to say.
Oh, I love that.
I think because like, gold has to be like refined and like, anyway, that's me getting too poetic. But I would say the gold lining in it was that my parents, they are still like this all the time. They were just such encouragers of me and my sister's creativity. And I feel like that honestly, that really defined a lot of my childhood. So even when like the preacher's kid thing, like people tend to put people who grew up as a preacher's kid in two boxes. You're either like trying to become a preacher just like your parents, or you're just like a rebel who just like the exact opposite. And I was just sort of like, both of those seem exhausting. I'm just kind of hanging out in the middle. And the thing that really sustained me a lot was just, I loved making music. I loved making things. Like I loved illustrating and drawing. And I wasn't even very good at drawing, but I really enjoyed it. And I really do believe it was an escape, but also just like art has always just been such a way to find peace at a young age. So, when I hear stories about people who were not encouraged or even discouraged from doing art or something creative, like I have so much like sympathy and compassion for people who've been through that, because I'm like, oh, I don't know where I would be if I didn't have parents who weren't just like cheering me on. You can be an artist. You can do anything. So much to the point that I was just like, y'all need to chill. Like, what if I don't, what if I just, what if I don't want to do art anymore? And they were like, we believe in you. Your art is good. You should do more of it. And
Wow.
yeah, and they didn't have a lot of money. Like our notebooks will come from the dollar store. It was very just sort of like use what you have to make something. When I started playing guitar, I didn't even own a guitar for the first year. I was actually borrowing my grandfather's guitar before I could save up to get my own. And so, yeah, it wasn't just like they're spending thousands of dollars on art lessons and things like that, because we didn't have the money for that. But when I even think about like the experiences that informed me as a child and like the things that I really attribute to who I am today, a lot of it had to do with the arts and my exposure to it. And I feel like that was the way into just learning about other cultures and learning about other people. And yeah.
And this is so rare. I feel like it's quite rare, especially when I used to take clients and stuff, especially for all the artists listening. Where do you think their encouragement of your art came from? Were they artists themselves, even though your dad's a preacher?
Yeah, my dad's a musician and my mom is an artist in like so many different capacities. So I mean, she's like interior designer. She had a magazine at one point. She's really into fashion. And if I ever have to go somewhere and look nice, like I just go to my mom's house and get her to style me. She like collects vintage clothes and she's just really eclectic. We lived in this house that was over 100 years old. But on the inside, the walls are bright red and bright yellow. And it was super creative. And I really do feel like that's where I even got like my love for color and not being afraid of what people think. My mom, and she talks about this, like being a preacher's wife, like people would expect you to dress a certain way. So my mom's like wearing colorful clothes and people would say to her like, oh, why are you wearing that? Like, aren't you a preacher's wife? Like, I don't like that. And she would just kindly say like, you know what? I'm so glad that I didn't get dressed for you today.
Wow. I love her. Wow.
Like that's just the kind of like comebacks that my mom just like, it's just like, wow, she was so graceful in saying it. So yeah, my mom is very, very, and that right away meeting her. My dad's a bit more reserved, but they're both just creative people and they both love kids too. Like I can see that now with my son and how they are with him. Like I just remember their first date was to a teacher supply store.
Oh my gosh. Well, they knew they were on the same track.
Yeah, I think that's it. I think they just sort of bond around like, we care about the next generation. Like that's our thing. So I think that was how they ended up being that way with my sister and I. And yeah, I tell them all the time, I'm like, I'm super grateful for it because I have tons of self-doubt. So I'm glad that I had two people in my corner, like, you can do it. It really made a difference.
Well, the self-doubt is a perfect way to parlay into you were a musician before what you're doing now. And I'll let you explain that a little. But you, I think, from how I understand it, you had a pivotal moment where you got the biggest ping that you were like, I'm done. I'm going to stop. And ended up writing some poetry about it, right? That went viral via Pinterest. Is that correct?
Yes. I love the way you tell the story. I'm like, like I just need that little soundbite and I'm just going to take that with me and say, here you go.
You're like, here's the elevator pitch.
Yes, I love it. So that is exactly what happened. I was living in Nashville at the time and I moved there specifically to work on music full time. So I was working on an album. I had a songwriting publishing deal where I was going in and writing songs for other artists. And what I quickly learned is that it doesn't really pay the bills that well or that quickly. I mean, you kind of have to put in a lot of years unless you just, happen to be someone who has a big break right away. And that just wasn't my story. So I was just kind of in a tough situation because I was really tired because I was giving my all trying to make music work because that was something that I knew how to do. And I felt like I knew how to do it well. It comes very naturally to me. And at the same time, I was also broke. And my husband, we were in our early 20s and he was tour managing at the time. So he was also really tired. And, that's obviously a job, but it's not like, it's a different kind of job than if you, work somewhere in an office with benefits and that kind of thing. So there was just a lot of instability. You can be tired or broke, but it's really hard to sustain those two together for a long period of time. Like it's hard to not have financial resources while you're also exhausted and feeling overworked. So that's honestly, I think, what drove me to the point of like, we have to leave Nashville because contrary to what a lot of people think about, because Nashville's in the South, Nashville is not cheap.
I've heard that. My friend recently has been looking to move there, and it feels like it's kind of the equivalent to LA in a way.
It's getting there. I would say it's getting even more intense because of that. You have a lot of people moving. And I feel like that's happening to a lot of other cities, like happened in Austin. Like I think a lot of times people are like, oh, Nashville, like, well, it's gotta be like cheaper than LA. It's like, yeah, maybe by like $10, but and we weren't like funded by someone else to be there. So it was just like really challenging to be there and to be productive there and to feel like it could make sense. So we literally looked at the map and we were like, where can we go that's affordable to live? And we'll just start over there. And we ended up in Dallas, Texas. That was the motivating factor to move to Dallas. And we ended up finding some community there, which was really great. But in terms of work, it was still a challenge. Okay, but what are we doing here? Like, now that we're saving money, what's next? And my husband at the time, he had some background in construction. So he had started doing that. And then I was just doing like whatever little freelance thing I could find, whether it was like, I know Photoshop, I know how to design little things. I think like at one point, I don't know if you've ever heard of the website Fiverr.com. You can pay somebody $5 to make something for you, like a logo. So,
wow, great.
At one point I was on there. Like I was just like, oh, I can design a logo. Like I still remember I designed this baseball blogs logo. I still think about that from time to time. All kinds of odd stuff. Just doing whatever to pay the bills. And I think what ended up happening was at the end of 2016, I just got to a point where I was just like, this is kind of the same thing. I'm still tired and broke. I'm still exhausted. I feel like I'm not going anywhere. And I just had a breakdown and it literally turned into a poem. It was the first poem that I had written in a very long time. And I wasn't trying to write poetry. It just came out that way. And yeah, like you said, that ended up being the poem that went viral and really sort of ended up opening my eyes to what I'm doing today.
There's so many pieces I love in this because I can identify so deeply with your experience. Having been an actress, and in my opinion, a good one, and having a little bit of traction just like you did, but never enough to have monetary flow that was consistent and happy and easy. And I had multiple breakdowns on the floor crying, being like, universe, what is going on? Like, what's the thing? And it actually took me a lot longer probably than you, but it wasn't until I began to really listen to my own channeling ability. And I don't just mean spiritually, I mean like really listen to what's coming through me and express it until things started to take off, which sounds like was a very similar case for you. You had a moment where you're like, I'm going to channel this into very authentically, very organically through me into a piece of work, and I'm just going to toss it somewhere. We'll talk about if you had reservations on that, and then look what happened. And I think that that's really powerful for anybody to hear, regardless, especially for artists. I think this is a very powerful episode. But even if you're somebody who's in corporate and burnt out, if you're in a relationship or a marriage and you're totally burnt out, it's that moment of pure surrender and allowing things to come through you, like allowing God to come through you or the universe or whomever. The magic starts to spark, in my opinion.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I don't know if you've had this experience where it's just sort of like this moment where you realize there's this thing that maybe you thought you're supposed to be doing, but you have to kind of let that go in order for that flow to happen. And I think that I had just created this whole script in my mind of just like, no, I'm this kind of artist. I'm this kind of person. I'm a musician. I've invested time, money, resources. Like I've moved across the country for this thing. And it was really hard to let that go. My ego loves that story. It's a really good story. I thought we were onto something. And yeah, it wasn't until I was willing to let that go that I was really able to see, oh, wait a second, all along, there was something else that was happening. And the cool thing is that now I have been able to incorporate music back into what I do. And it's on my terms now. Like, I'm not stressed about it. I'm not worried about like, oh, I've got to write a hit single. I'm like, no, I can just write what speaks to me, and then it can just support the work that I'm already doing.
Love that. And I think what you covered is so, so important for people listening as well, who may be in this experience in all different facets of life. But it's so funny because I don't know if you felt this with music, but there is such a narrative out there with a lot of hope that you can struggle for so long and then the break happens. And I think that kept me in a loop for so long. And again, it was just a story. It wasn't surrendering to the here and now and what's showing up and what's coming through me. And I think that is such an important piece, is letting that story go in order to really find your authenticity. And I think what we really share in common is we've both been able to create a very successful, very fulfilling life out of truly just following what lights us up at this point, like surrendering all of that stuff and following the flow of the things that light us up. And I think you just touched on that really perfectly, because I've often felt this as well, that now when I look at all of the things I used to do in the past, like how I show up and being able to perform or et cetera, I can do that all within my brand, like having a YouTube channel or whatever. But just like you're saying, it's all on my terms, in my way, in my channeling and creativity. And that is so powerful, the age we're in.
Oh, when you really think about it, like on a soul level, it's like, that's what you really want, right? Like, we want to be able to do things without the pressure of feeling like we're constantly just like fighting to meet someone else's standard of who we should be. And it's hard to manage that because there is this part of me where I do have like I can be a bit of a perfectionist of my artwork. That kerning is just slightly off, or that negative space is just a bit too much. And that opacity is just driving me wild. And I'll get so fixated on little things. And I feel like that does help me with my art. But the downside of it is like, I'll also do that when I start like comparing myself to other people. And when I start like looking at other writers and other artists, I'm like, oh, look what they did. Like, look at their skill set. Like, that's so much, more improved than where I am. So I really have to, I feel like right now I'm in the space of constantly just sort of like living in this tension of, okay, it's okay to like get really focused on details and like get excited about what I do, but also like not getting so stressed out about it that it's not even fun anymore.
Yeah. What tools do you use for that? Because I think a lot of people can identify with that, where you're like, I'm not good enough. It's not perfect enough. Or maybe someone has this a little bit more advanced than I do. How do you navigate it?
Mm, yeah. So what I do, and I actually did it this morning. This is like, I would say that this is a spiritual practice for me. Like, it may sound weird to some people, but I do this often. So I know on the iPhone, but other phones probably have it as well. The feature that shows like how much time you're spending on an app or something. Like, it'll be like, you spent X amount of hours on Instagram this week or whatever. So for a while, I used to really judge myself for that and say like, oh, I need to try to spend less time on Instagram, which, okay, valid point. Yeah, the less time on a phone, great. And at the same time, I was like, let me flip it on its head. I was like, for some reason, when I'm just sitting there idle time, I end up going to one of these social media apps. What if I made it a practice that the second I opened the app, the first thing I did was I went right to my DMs and I talked to people first before I looked at a single thing. So what I will actually do is sometimes I will literally spend 30 minutes just responding to DMs and comments before I consume anything else. And that grounds me, because that reminds me, okay, when you start comparing yourself to that brand or that person, remember the other person who you made this for in the first place. I did that today. And it made all the difference with the next 15 minutes I ended up spending on the app. And yeah, it's not like some drastic thing, but I would say that, especially if someone is sharing, their voice or sharing something online in any capacity, I think that spend time talking with people one-on-one is a huge way that I break out of that. And then the other thing that I do is I give myself permission to unfollow. And if someone is their stuff is whatever they're sharing, it could be amazing. But it's like if I feel bad, that doesn't mean I think they're a bad person. I think they're a great person. And I'll just say, I can't follow this right now because it's bringing up something for me and I just can't follow it right now. And it takes a lot of humility to even say that now because I feel like there's so much pressure to be like, oh, don't let things bother you. Whatever. It's just social media. Like, it's not that big of a deal. I'm really learning to say like, no, for whatever reason, seeing this person get that opportunity, like that's something that I need to sit with, but I don't have to sit there and look at pictures of it every day.
Yeah. And be triggered like every single day.
Yeah. So it's hard to say that out loud because I tend to kind of be like, I don't want things to bother me. And I don't want to let other people know things bother me.
I think, yeah. And you said as somebody who has self-doubt come up in general, how do you, when that voice comes up in your head that maybe would have been the voice that would have said, I shouldn't put this poem on Pinterest, this is just for me or whatever. How do you get past that? Because I think that's the number one inhibitor for artists and people, entrepreneurs.
Yes. Kind of going back to what I was saying about the DMs, I can honestly say that it has been one-on-one interactions that really sustain the work that I do. So back in 2017, I invited people to, and I just posted an Instagram story. I was just realizing that for some reason, when I started to DM people and talk to people one-on-one about what I was sharing in my poetry, that's when I was inspired to write more. So I was just like, well, maybe that's just what I need to do is just write for one person at a time and not try to concern myself with like trying to write for an audience. Because at that time, there's a lot more out there now in terms of like poetry and art as like a hybrid and mixing it together. But back then there wasn't a ton out there. I was like, I don't know what genre or what niche I'm in. I don't even know what this thing is. I don't know what I'm doing. So I was getting really stuck there. So I was like, let me just write for the people who are already here, just one at a time. So I posted about that. And within 24 hours, I had hundreds of messages from people who I didn't even know, people who didn't even follow me. And since then, I have done some variation on that every single week, inviting people to just share a story or a topic or a question. And I make artwork in response to that. So I share all that to say, I have to keep that at the bedrock of what I do. And it has to stay that way.
It's definitely when it comes up for you, it's getting back to the source of what inspired you in the first place.
Yes, I have to keep that there. And because there are moments where I think about specific people in my mind and some of their faces I never saw, but I read their email, or I read their DM, and I still think about some of those stories. People that I wrote for and people who I didn't even know how to write something for them. And I felt like I was not really giving them anything because what they were going through was just really hard. And I was just like, I don't even know how to respond. And I still think about those people and I bring that into my work. And what's been really interesting to me is, and I think a lot of other people struggle with this too, of like, it's harder sometimes to reflect on what you're feeling and your emotions. And sometimes it's easier to actually kind of enter into someone else's story and really kind of connect with them. And what I found is that I actually end up learning more about myself in doing this. Through all of these interactions that I've had with people, I've actually learned more about myself just as a person, as an artist, because I've realized I'm writing for them, but I'm also writing for myself. It's just this interesting thing that happens. It's like generosity, but at the same time, I end up kind of pouring back into myself in a lot of ways.
So I'm quickly interrupting this episode to invite you, if you're ready to start your manifestation journey, or if anything you've heard in our manifestation episodes has piqued your interest to begin. We have a la carte workshops in everything from the basics bundle, which is what we recommend to everyone who starts. It's the formula that actually teaches you how to manifest, unblocked inner child, and unblocked shadow. We also have a la carte workshops on love and money. But the real gem is the Pathway membership because it encompasses every single workshop we have. It's a year-long membership with full access to the few a la carte offerings we have and exclusive workshops not available anywhere else, such as the daily practice, which is what everybody in the Pathway uses, hopefully at least 3 times a week to daily, in order to truly create the new neural pathways that one needs in order to manifest, and houses the library of our deep imaginings, which is our unique hypnosis process that allows you to get into your subconscious and overwrite those old neural pathways, creating the new ones. You can use our special code EXPANDED, all caps, EXPANDED, to receive $20 off your first a la carte workshop purchase or $20 off your first month of the Pathway. Again, that's all caps, EXPANDED, EXPANDED. Okay, now back to the episode. Ever, because this has happened to me. There were a couple of motivating factors for, starting to hire people and have a team, was that I would get burnt out. And for me, what that feeling was, being so psychic, is I felt I had so many people reaching and needing me to succeed at what they wanted. And growing up as a codependent, that pressure of like, I want to make sure you get what you want in your life. So I couldn't just like cut it off or let it go. I had to create boundaries around it, and also just support in general, because I have like a low bandwidth of energy. So is there a point where you ever find that like your inspiration gets stale, even interacting with community, or you burn out, or that you just want to stop or get off social media? Like, does that ever come up for you?
Oh, yes, all the time. I'm very similar to you in the capacity of low energy. That is real. I will say that I do feel like I've been able to manage a steady pace for the most part. I haven't had any really significant, like, I just need to quit for a while, at least over the past 3 or 4 years. And I mean, that time could come. Like, I'm open to that. Like, I'm waiting for the day I get to take a sabbatical and put my phone in a drawer. But that day hasn't come yet. But in the meantime, one thing that I am very serious about, a really firm boundary that I've created, is I do not put pressure on myself to be present online in all of the ways. So if anyone follows me on Instagram, for instance, you will notice you rarely ever see me doing an Instagram story where I'm just talking to camera, because that drains me. It actually is less draining for me to DM someone and talk to them. So I'm like, well, let me just do that, because I actually have more energy for that. That doesn't take as much out of me. And I think that we're all wired differently, though. So you have to figure out what things drain the most energy out of you, and then do less of those things, even if there's a lot of pressure to do them. Another example of that is there's an app that's getting more popular called Clubhouse.
I know. What's going on there?
Yeah.
I just learned about it a week ago.
Yeah. So I've known about it for a few months, because it actually really kind of took off with a lot of people in the Black entertainment industry.
So it's mostly music based?
It kind of, I feel like that was music, comedians, entertainment. That was kind of
okay.
to my knowledge, and I could be getting it wrong, that was kind of the first batch of people that really, and again, just like it was just some very specific like Black creators that really went in. And so when I heard that, I was like, oh, I want to go be a part of it. Like, that sounds like awesome. So I got an invite and I was like listening. And then after being on there for an hour, I was like, this really drains me. And I was really bummed because I was like, this is so exciting. Like, this is such an opportunity for me to support creatives and support people who look like me, who may not be heard as much. It was just it felt like the thing to do, you know? And at the same time, I was just like, for some reason, the way I'm wired, because it's kind of like a social media conference call, which if you think about it, kind of a lot. And I was like, there's some people, this is how they're wired. This energizes them and they're fueled by creating and collaborating in this way. And for me, I'm just more fueled by the one-on-one, the emailing back and forth, the DMing, and that's where I have to put my energy. So that was just like a recent example of a time that I had to and I've had people ask me like, hey, can you be in a room with me on Clubhouse? And I just have to say, no, I don't have the energy for it. So that's really hard because especially when what you love becomes your job and it becomes a business, you want to be mindful of like, oh, you got to stay on top of the trends, or you want to make sure your business is growing. And I've just found, you know what, there's some places though where I'm just going to say no. And right now I just can't do that. So I do think that's a strength of mine. I don't really struggle with the no when it comes to energy distribution. Yeah. I'm like, that's going to wear me out. You guys have fun and I'll see you when you get back.
My no's are so clear based on energy. I'm just like you, which is so hard for a lot of people. But I think when you don't have literally the physical bandwidth, you just get pretty good at it pretty quickly.
Yeah, exactly. You're like, I literally can't do it. I won't be able to do anything else today. So, yeah.
And how has it felt as a Black woman in this space of creativity in social media, being a beautiful force of representation in art and poetry and people's stories and expression? What is the feedback you've received, or maybe the way that you've been super expansive to others? How does that all feel?
Oh, yes. Oh, thank you for saying that. I had a lot of anxiety, and I mean, I think it's still there with just being on the internet. When I was a teenager, I shared a video of myself singing a country song, just having fun. And I was called some really terrible racial slurs. And that really just like sent the message to me very early on of like, the internet is filled with evil people. Be careful with what you say. And I became very protective of like what I would share and how I would share things, because I'm sensitive. Like I may not present that way. That racial slur, even though someone may say that was just a random user on the internet, it still hurt. I was a teenager, like it still affected me. That moment kind of led to a lot of just feeling very closed off and just like, I don't know how people would even react to me talking about Blackness or anything like that. I had a lot of anxiety around that. And then last year I had someone tag me in something. They were criticizing my work and they did so in a racist way. I was around my sister, who is just way more hyped than me, when I found out. And she was like, we're going to respond right now. I wrote like a response. She was like, you should post it. And I was like, okay. All right. So I shared it on my story and I was just so nervous, but literally within 5 minutes, I was so shocked at the outpouring of support that people of every ethnicity were sending me messages and willing to go to bat for me. Like, not on my watch. This is not going to happen. And it was just such a good moment for me. And that was just last year. I mean, it was just such a good moment because I had been carrying all that fear with me. And I didn't even realize that fear was still that strong until that moment happened. And then seeing how, in contrast to what that one person said, there were all these other people who were supportive. That just gave me so much hope. So that was pretty pivotal for me. And then I get so excited when I see young Black women following me saying they look up to me. I'm just like, how? Like, that's so cool. Cause I mean, I feel like I didn't have, like, even now, like if, I love to do abstract art, it's really hard to find Black abstract artists. If you just Google abstract art, there are not going to be any Black artists that show up typically right at the beginning. You have to kind of dig to find them. So for me, it just means a lot to know that, something that I do, my hope is that If there is some 14-year-old Black girl watching me right now, I hope she's a million times better than me. Like, I hope that if I did anything that inspired her, that it's just a way of like fanning her flame and encouraging her to continue on. So yeah, that really means a lot to me.
I love that. And yeah, just so important to be that expanding and beautiful force. You're such a positive energy in general. So it's just really, really special to hear that. I have a selfish question for you now. So somebody who has very similarly, sensitive and a limited energetic bandwidth, I'm in my third trimester, and the biggest emotional instabilitating nervous breakdowns are coming around. Like, how am I going to be fully supported when this baby comes? You know what I mean? Like, I love being a part of this company and the capacity that I am and showing up for this community. How have you navigated work and motherhood and success? Like, even up to last year, having a toddler, and even though the space didn't work out, but creating all of that, like, how do you do all that?
Yes. Well, again, huge shout out to my parents. I'm very grateful that they live nearby. So I have some built-in babysitters who I know I can trust. So that is a huge part of it. And outside of that, it has been really hard. I feel like I don't think I ever used a calendar prior to having a baby, because I was just like, no, I'll get to it when I get to it. But now I'm like, no, if you've got 45 minutes to work, you've got 45 minutes to work. Like, you have to get it done in that time. So it's definitely made me a lot more disciplined, which I think in some ways I needed, because that's just not really how I'm naturally wired. It's forced me to create some structure in my life that I didn't necessarily have. And so my husband is my business partner as well. And it was when I was in my third trimester that we were like, I think we need to hire people. And that was really scary for me because I had never been a boss before. I'm like, I don't know how to run a team. Like, I don't know how to tell people what to do. I don't even know how to tell myself what to do. It was a huge from spring 2019 when my son was born until now. It's just been a huge growth in areas that maybe I didn't know I needed to grow in. Another big one is I've just been having some health issues. And so even with watching my son, like, there's been times where I've had to like ask my parents, like, hey, can, he stay for an extra hour? And it's hard to ask for help. There's a lot of like, no, I'm a parent. I have to be strong. I have to do this. And it's hard to say that. Yeah, I'm just going to be totally transparent. It has not been easy for me. And at the same time, I do feel like it's definitely like, okay, this is really, it's helping me in ways that I don't think I'm going to be able to see right now. And I'm going to have to just be patient and just see how it all plays out. The final thing is just that, yeah, I'm actually really shocked that I get anything done. Like, I look back over like the past few months, I'm like, how did I do all of that? I don't even remember doing that. So it's interesting. It's a bit of a mystery and a lot of things within that mystery.
And throughout motherhood so far and being an entrepreneur, what have been your best tips that have been like the most successful with your son, that you guys jive the best? I'm taking anything I can get from anybody right now.
I love it. I love it. It's so weird to be on that end because I feel like I'm the one always asking. I'm like, tell me, how do you do this? Because I still feel like I'm getting started. And I think one of the big words that comes up for me is just curiosity. I think that was the first thing I noticed about my son, was that he was just so curious about every little thing, and still is. And I feel like that honestly drives a lot of how he and I connect. And just like earlier today, like, he was just really intrigued with putting this crayon inside of a cup and spinning it around. And he was just so amazed. And at first I was just like, okay, this is really loud. Are you done yet? And I was just like, let me just try to see it through his eyes. And then I actually got the cup and I started doing the same thing. And then he started cracking up and laughing. And then he was done with the cup. It's so interesting. I was like, that was just a little moment where I had the option to go two directions. I could just take the cup because I'm like, this is driving me crazy. Like it's making too much noise. I'm like, let me just be a little curious with him, like get on his level. And yeah, those moments I feel like end up being some of the most where he's teaching me, like teaching me to be a kid again. And I feel like we really bond over that. And it's been a lot of fun, especially just during the pandemic, being at home a lot, not having a lot of places to go. A lot of times I feel guilt because we had actually we had actually gotten Disneyland passes like a month before the pandemic. I was like, seriously? We got to go like 2 times. And my vision was like, I thought at this point right now, like we were just going to be going to Disney, for the weekend, and we're going to be exposing him to all of these things. And now, I'm watching him get excited about like a crayon spinning in a cup. Oh, I want so much more. But at the same time, I'm like, maybe I need to kind of unlearn that idea of I need more and actually just look at how simple joy can be found. So yeah, I feel like he's always teaching teaching me things in that way. And curiosity, I feel like has just become one of my favorite words in parenting. And then I would say that on the entrepreneurship side of things, you mentioned this word earlier, and I love the word too, and that's surrender. And I just think that there's so much pressure when you're trying to start your own thing or be a part of a smaller or newer project you do have to wear a lot of hats. You have to do a lot of different things in order for things to get done. And I just had to learn how to surrender, like, but you can't do it all though. Like you can do a lot of different things. Yes, you can. That's wonderful. But there's going to be some stuff that you just can't do. I feel like I was following a lot of people at this time who are great. I'm just discovering I was wired differently. A lot of like women who were entrepreneurs and they were like CEOs and like running these businesses. And I was like, I need to do that. I've got to learn more about finance, this, and that. And at some point I realized like I'm an artist. I'm actually really bad at spreadsheets. Like I'm actually really bad at all of those. I can't even think of the words. Whatever the finance people do, I'm like, I'm not good at balancing sheets and budgeting. Like, I'm sure if I absolutely, if it was all on me, I would figure it out, but that's not my strength. And just recognizing that even like my husband, it was so hard for me to give that over to him. I can't just be like the woman who's just like, here, man, take all the money stuff, you handle it.
Yeah, I totally understand.
I was like, no, I don't want to be that way. I got to figure it out myself. But I had to really surrender. It's like, Morgan, you're not wired that way. And that's okay. It's like, you're really bad at math, and that's fine. You can do other things. You don't have to be a superwoman in order to have a business and a brand. And that was really hard to let go of because I was just putting all this pressure on myself to, maybe look like another woman entrepreneur who maybe is gifted in finance in a way that I'm not, and pressuring myself to be like that person. And it's like, no, I'm wired the way I'm wired, so I'm going to lean into the strengths that I have. So, yeah, I feel like that's been one of the hardest but most important lessons that I've been learning.
Oh, I love it all. Every one of them, I'm taking away the surrender to not having to be at all. And then I love getting on their level and really going through the motivation of curiosity. Such great takeaways. I'm putting them in my where I'm chalking up everything. So I'm really grateful for that.
And then the Wonder Weeks app. I don't know if you've heard of that app.
No.
Yeah, it's a cool little app that just goes through like child development, and it's like this week they may be doing this. And you can like put their little picture in there.
Wow. So it really explains.
Yeah. So that was fun to use.
That's awesome. Okay, I'm going to download that as well. That's really, really helpful. I think the question I receive the most, I'm trying to build clients. I don't know what I'm doing wrong because it's not picking up. I'm trying to build my following and it's not seeming to go anywhere. And I have like an energetic perspective on this that I share with people of what's going on there. But for you, which seems like it's been a very organic process. Obviously, a lot of work is involved in it, but tell me what you think creates the biggest flow in your company of growing it.
Oh, I love that question. I think what I would say is I am very, and this, I feel like it's such a cliche word, but I'm very driven by that concept of curiosity and particularly creative curiosity. And what I try to do with everyone that works with us and works within our company is to almost to the point get on their nerves to let them know you have the power to like share your ideas. Like we need your ideas. I know I'm the artist, who created this whole thing, but I'm like, it's the community that makes this what it is. At the end of last year, I had some people on the team. I was like, let's just do just like a fun slideshow for our weekly meeting. I had everybody like put what they were most proud of themselves for the last week. Like, even if it was just, I went outside for 10 minutes and got fresh air, like whatever it was. And then to just make like a mood board of stuff that they like. So I am really big into trying to bring that childlike creative curiosity into work. I feel like I would say that's probably my goal. Like, I feel like I'm at the happiest and I feel like we're thriving the most when people feel free to like share their ideas. So I've been doing a lot of video lately. And I literally tell everyone on the team in Slack every week, I'm like, send me whatever videos you're loving. I don't care if it's like a random TikTok or something on Netflix. I'm like, send me what you're watching. Like, let's talk about it. I think literally the last conversation I had for the week was with someone on our team. And we were just talking about WandaVision, like the new Marvel show. And for me, I just feel like all of that fuels the work and it impacts the work because I just think that the way that the world is structured, it seems like, okay, you have your moments of like where you can do something creative or fun. But for me, I'm like, I believe that we need to bring that creative energy way higher into everything that we do. And I just think the world will be a better place if more good-hearted people felt like they had permission to contribute and share their ideas. And those are some of my proudest moments. Like when I see people on our team, like, okay, I'm starting to write more for my personal project. And me and my husband actually set this, and we've told the employees that work with us, we're like, we hope that we get to a point one day where y'all come to us and say, we're leaving the company to start our own thing. we've learned and we've grown, and now we're going to go start our own thing. And that drives what I do. I really do want to see people like tell their own story and grow in their own creative potential and just grow in general. I don't know why I'm so passionate about that. I think a lot of it probably has to do because I would not be where I am today had it not been for people like my parents who pushed me in that way. I deal with so much self-doubt and second guessing myself. It matters to have people in your corner who are just like, you can do it. You are creative. You do have good ideas. That makes a difference. That's probably just my parents coming through in me of just like pass that on. Like if in some small way you can inspire somebody else to share their ideas or contribute in a new creative way, then that's what makes it worth it.
Yeah, here we call it vision holding. And I think it's paramount in order to have enough space to bring your manifestations through. Otherwise, if you've never seen to believe it's possible, you have to be fed from somewhere to believe that something's possible. So it's really affirming and beautiful, especially for maybe anybody in your community that might be listening today, of how much you nurture that in others. And it's so key. It's so, so key. So that's really well said. And I think I'll probably end off on this one because I love this. And I think this is really pertinent to art in general and artists. But you posted recently, we have the ability to make things that make others feel seen. And I think it's not just to art, it's to everything. But in art especially, may it be film, music, visual, like any medium, this is so, so important. How do you move past imposter syndrome or even fear of vulnerability in order to tap into that place to make others feel seen?
I love that. And a lot of it happens on accident. If I'm being honest, I feel like what I do with my art and how I share it and everything that I do share with others, the times where I have really been the most vulnerable and the most just like in that flow and not driven by fear, those moments have come from like I don't know why this phrase is coming up for me, but this image of a slow burn of just like slowly and slowly just feeding that fire over time. And I don't think I realized that's what I was doing because a lot of my, especially my art, when I look at my art pieces individually, a lot of times I don't love them. I'm just being totally vulnerable and transparent. I like them. I'm okay with them. I see the value in them, but I don't love them. I don't look at them and say, oh, I love this. However, when I start to zoom out and I see the work that I created over a month or the work I created over a year or over 2 years, 3 years, I'm like, oh, now I can see. It's been a slow burn. I've been adding to the fire just over time. I've been gradually becoming more vulnerable. I've been gradually becoming more courageous. And it didn't just happen in a flash. Maybe that happens for some people, but it didn't happen that way. So what I try to encourage people to do, like one thing I've been doing more of is sharing like writing prompts and things. And I asked on my Instagram story the other day, I said, what are you struggling with in terms of like sharing your voice, particularly your writing voice? And someone responded and they said, I don't know where to start. So I took that sentence and I was like, all right, there you go. That's your first sentence. And I wrote a whole thing. I was like, I don't know where to start, but I'm going to start anyway. I don't feel like what I have to say is valid. I don't feel like what I have to say is important, that anyone's going to read it, but I'm going to write it and I'm going to share it anyway. And I got so many responses to that when I shared that. So I was like, that's a part of your story too. You don't have to get to the place of like being fearless or having the big idea before you can just say like, I'm just going to show up where I am as I am and just share that little bit. And it might not feel like very much, but you're going to look back a year from now and see like, oh, wait a second. There was like a fire that was slowly growing over time. And now I can see it.
What I love about it the most too is rather than having a formula to have it fully figured out, it feels like you're constantly tapping into it from different angles of interaction with others. And that's what's so cool about your brand is it's really built on interacting with others. So it's like they really have stake in everything you create. And I think that to me, it's such a refreshing business model, and it's different than things like sending out surveys and consumer feedback and blah, 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 because you're actually creating a lot of work based on the stories you're receiving or the questions that are being answered and, these dialogues you're having inside of your DMs and with your community. And that is just super, super cool. It's such a different new way of formulating storytelling.
Thank you for saying that. And that's a heart of mine. And I do feel like it's new and it's also simultaneously really old. I always love to think about my ancestors that I never got to know. And, being a person who is Black and a descendant of African slaves means that there's a whole lot about my ancestors that I'll never know. And at the same time, I think about them a lot. And I was just like, you know what? I feel like my ancestors will be proud to see that part of what I do. It's like, oh, that concept of just sitting around together, that ancient concept of just sitting and sharing with one another, it's still living on through our great, 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 great granddaughter. So yeah, I think about that a lot too.
Okay, the very, very last thing I'll end on, and I do promise this, is you touched on it a little bit of the self-care earlier, your process with the DMs and overall spiritual practice, self-care. Is there anything else that's consistent for you that really helps to keep you grounded daily, grounded back into your own energy, back into yourself and feeling great?
I have to have quiet time.
Same.
Like if I go a whole day with no quiet time, those are not usually good days. And I'm learning to own that more. I definitely struggled with that when I was younger. I remember particularly in college, I was like, how did I find it then? And I don't think I really did. I think it was just like the few minutes before my roommate came back in the room. But now, like I will just have to say to my husband, I'm like, can you just take our son just for a little bit? Like I need this time. And he's actually wired a little differently. Like he doesn't need that. So I take advantage of that. I'm like, I need it though. So I would say that for me is the biggest thing that fills me up, of just being able to sit in silence and Sometimes it's working on art. Sometimes it's literally just lying in bed, like not even taking a nap, just lying there. So that part of it looks different. Like yesterday, I think, was it yesterday? Yeah, yesterday it was an extra long shower. For some reason, I was just like, I'm just going to stay in here for a little while. And yeah, so I would say that that quiet time is really, really important for me. And I try to cultivate that as much as possible.
I'm right there with you. It's very Aquarian. In fact, at this very moment, I'm having on our property an office space built that's detached from the house because I know I'll need that to survive in any capacity. So I love that you mentioned it and that you feel guilt-free about it and that you know what you need in order to show up and be present, as probably a wife, as a mother, and certainly as an artist. And I couldn't identify more with that.
Well, I'm so grateful that you connect on that level.
Yeah, this was such a beautiful conversation, Morgan. I'm so grateful for your time and your insight. I got so many aha moments today, so I know many people listening have as well. And yeah, just really thankful for that.
Yes, well, thank you as well. I've really enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you so much for tuning into the episode, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, we did. And in case you're not totally ready to join the pathway yet, I wanted to share a few of our free offerings that I'll often suggest to people as a little bit of a blueprint to get them started on their manifestation journey. The first place I like to direct people completely for free is the motivation. You can see it linked below or on our homepage as our testimony library. And it's categorized by different subjects, whether you're calling in career, money, love, wellness, and much more. When you're reading about a member's experience of what they manifested, you're actually seeing to believe and showing your subconscious that that very thing is possible for you. The second place I like to direct people is to the free clarity exercise, which is also linked below. In it, you get to try our own unique hypnosis process, learn about the science, and some journaling prompts. And the best part about this, you'll get a tiny taste of what it's like to go into your hypnotic state, bring your subconscious forward, and create new neural pathways while receiving clarity. And the third thing, if you haven't listened to it on this podcast yet, please go back to the episode titled Manifestation 101, where you'll learn the basics of neural manifestation to truly understand this process. So go ahead and check out those free resources, the motivation, the free clarity exercise, and the episode Manifestation 101, all linked below. And in an effort to make sure to have representation in this process series, go ahead and submit any process testimonials you have, especially to our LGBTQ+ community, our BIPOC, as well as the Ys, which is anyone in the community who is 45 and over. All right, we'll be back next week.